Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. We welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host. Coming to you once again through the Salam Media Network out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today's broadcast will entail a conversation with an award-winning journalist and longtime friend by the name of Phil Pasquini. The focus of our conversation, or I should say the title for today's conversation, is A Dialogue with a Globetrotter. Now, for the old timers out there, this is not about the that fabled basketball team that many of us know and love so well. This is going to be a conversation with someone who, along with his wife, Elaine, has traveled the globe and has much to share on what they have witnessed and reported on. Again, this is an award-winning journalist and a very dear friend. Phil and I first met years ago through a mutual friend, a Washington, D.C. based organization known as the American Education Trust, publisher of the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs. This is a magazine that is known worldwide, and it's a highly respected publication. Brother Sadek, if please show the publication on screen, the cover of the edition that I gave you. Okay, this is the magazine. It is it's a thought-provoking read. Comes out 6 times a year, and Phil and his wife Elaine, both photojournalists, have been affiliated with this magazine and the organization that produces it for many years. This is how we first met. Now, needless to say, given the title, A Dialogue with a Globetrotter, needless to say, the issues up for discussion today will span the globe. To kind of just lay the table for what will follow. On the immigration front, which unfortunately today is a very hot button issue both here and abroad, including, from what I've heard and read, in South Africa as well. This is a hot button issue. But here in the United States, there were 43,000 ICE-related detentions, i.e., racial kidnappings for profit. In America last month, 43,000 detentions in the space of a month. And this is heartbreaking. The Trump administration's oppressive policies make a mockery of the promise etched in stone at the base of Lady Liberty in New York Harbor. A famous quote reads, "Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." What a mockery. This contradiction represents a never-ending challenge for the better of the two Americas. And then we have the internecine, the internal struggle that's taking place right now within the MAGA cult. The the breakaway of Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and many others, resulting from the Trump administration's slavish alliance to the apartheid Zionist regime called Israel, and its unconscionable policy reversal on the Epstein files. This is what has caused a tremendous amount of tumult within the MAGA cult. In a recent release on X, this is what former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say, and I quote, "Total betrayal. The House of Representatives passed the NDAA 216 to 212. 7 Republicans voted no. 6 Democrats voted yes. This $1.1 trillion military budget contains Section 219 that ties our military intelligence and military industrial base to Israel. Now it goes to the Senate." Now, hopefully the Senate will do the right thing and save the more notorious of the two Americas from itself. Now, in response to this report on the so-called dignified, or I should say another report on the so-called dignified return of deceased U.S. soldiers, their bodies from the Gulf, a war that didn't have to happen. Marjorie Taylor Greene stated, quote, "This is heartbreaking." This is her quote on X. "This is heartbreaking and should not have happened. We voted to end this. Their poor families," end quote. Now, to family and friends, neighbors and adversaries in this fabled land of liberty and justice for all, once again, we are reminded that elections have consequences. Now, for those who voted for Trump, we voted to end this, quote unquote. This is what we've been hearing from Marjorie and many of her Republican affiliates. We voted to end this. This was just an illusion. It was just an illusion. And it's wake up time. On that note, let's go to our first commercial break, Brother Sadiq, so that we can have some uninterrupted conversation on the other side.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031-208-9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic Sharia and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
More than 800 million people around the world live in deep poverty, uncertain of where the next meal will come from. For those on the brink of starvation, a food pack means survival, dignity, and hope. Send food, send kindness. Be the reason a family does not go hungry. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
Hey Gulam.
Yeah?
Did I return your lawnmower last month?
No, bye, you didn't.
Oh no. Now what'll I do? I wanted to borrow it again, man.
With Randry Jewelers, you won't have to borrow or lend because the prices are so well trimmed on all gold and diamond jewelry. Alternatively, we could remake your old jewelry into a brilliant new design. Visit Randry Jewelers at 151 Stevens Lamini Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randry Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
Tonight, a child in a shack will try to sleep through the cold. No heating, no insulation, just thin walls and a biting cold. African Muslims Agency is on the ground, reaching families in informal settlements across South Africa with blankets and winter essentials. Help us spread warmth this winter. For 180 Rand, give a blanket. For 360 Rand, a full winter pack. One gift, one less night in the cold. African Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, today we will have a conversation, a dialogue with a globetrotter, a friend by the name of Phil Pasquini. In fact, he's a little bit more than a friend. He's like a brother from another mother. And without any further ado, let us welcome him to today's conversation.
Hello, I'm honored.
Brother, how are you?
Good.
Good. You good?
Yes.
Good, Phil. It's good to have you on with me today. Now, I said, just a little bit about you in my intro, but there's a lot more to share about you and the work that you and your wife, Elaine, have done for years now. Why don't you share a little bit more with the viewing and listening audience?
Well, we've, as you noted, have been on the staff at the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs magazine for the past 30 years, working on all these issues, human rights, cultural issues, political issues, and so on. And we find ourselves having expanded into other media as well, both radio, TV, and other print and online publications. So to say the least, we're very busy. We like to travel, and we do, as you noted. And I like you, I had a good laugh with Globetrotter, because that first thing to my mind is Harlem Globetrotters.
Harlem Globetrotters.
From my youth. But I never thought of myself as a Globetrotter. Someone called us a jet setter. I didn't think about that one either. The desire to travel, I should say, embellishes itself deeply in your soul. And I have kind of gypsy roots, if you will. My family's been on the road for a very long time, and we have moved around in a lot of different places. And so it comes as a natural extension of our existence together, that we've been fortunate enough to go to many countries and visit many things and covering many things for news that have endowed us with a different perception of what's going on as opposed to what's presented in the narrative in national or mainstream, as they call it, media. So we've always worked in the vein of alternative media, where I think there's a great deal of information being presented that people aren't confronted with through the normal course of events of being curious and reading and discovering things.
And how did you first get connected to the Washington Report, the folk at the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs?
Well, Elaine calls it serendipitous, and it truly it is. She had subscribed to the magazine, and at that time we were living full-time on the West Coast, and there was an event that was about to happen, and she contacted them and asked them if they would be covering it, and they wrote back and said, well, we don't have anyone there. If you write something, we'd be happy to consider it for publication, which they did. And so that kind of started the avalanche of the small snowball rolling down the hill, becoming larger and larger. So we were both working in other professions at the time, but had great interest in the Middle East. We'd been to Egypt and traveled around to Tunisia and so forth and other places. And so that piqued our curiosity to become engaged in telling the story that we saw before us that wasn't being told elsewhere. And so Elaine began writing very regularly. I started taking lots of photographs, eventually became involved with writing, and Elaine conversely began taking photographs. So we both have operated since that time as photojournalists and reporters in both capacities. So that was our start. That's what it continued to this day. So
yeah, that's amazing. And that's how you and I got connected years ago. But I mean, you connected to this this organization and the entity that produces it much longer than I have.
Yeah.
And I salute you and the other writers and photographers for the photojournalists for what they have been able to produce on a consistent basis for all of these years. I mean, I consider the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs one of the most important publications.
Oh, that's kind of you.
World.
I would agree.
Yes.
It presents an alternative narrative to what's out there.
Yes, indeed.
And I think if you read it, you will begin to question that which you've been presented with. But also, because it presents an alternative view, it causes people to think about the situation. And you can see the tide turning now. And I'm speaking respective to Israel, Palestine, and AIPAC, and all these other things that we are bombarded with information about. But people have begun, I'd say, looking deeper beyond the headlines, reading between the lines, and understanding that there are not only many points of view, but all of them have validity in one manner or another. Many of the things in the magazine that are published, you won't see anywhere else.
Right.
They are avoided or what can I say, just basically not part of what is being presented out there. So it's a good source of alternative, in-depth information. I would agree with that completely.
And if I remember correctly, and this is one of the unique features and blessings of this magazine and the entity that produces it. Correct me if I'm wrong. The organization itself was established by former U.S. government officials.
They were State Department, and they were the first Arabists in the State Department. They were studying Islamic culture and Islam and learned Arabic because they knew this was an important part of the world that was being overlooked by traditional State Department types. In fact, Ambassador Kilgore, Elaine and I reflect on this a lot. He said the reason he learned Arabic was he wanted to move out of Alabama and stay out of Alabama. He'd been raised down there, and he was tired of it. He wanted to move on.
Wow.
And both he and Richard Curtis founded the magazine because they knew with the establishment of Israel that portended a great upset in the Middle East in the future. And so they were really forward thinking, and I can't say reactionary, they were proactive. They understood that this was going to be an issue in the future that was going to be of major consequence, not even considering, the oil or that industry or the wealth that the area had, but they were interested in civil rights and human rights and all the things that we come to respect now as issues. They were pretty much at the forefront of that with this particular region. And so as time went on, Ambassador Kilgore eventually was the ambassador to Qatar for 4 years, I believe. And at the time he was asked, he tried to explain the importance of that position, what was going on in the region. And as he told his story, he was kind of mostly ignored and kind of marginalized. They seemed like it wasn't an important thing. I would say I would put that in a historical perspective when the Kingdom of Hawaii, for reciprocity, to get rid of reciprocity for sugar with the U.S., a proposition was made that the Hawaiian government would give up Pearl Harbor. And the U.S. Congress said, what do we need that for? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's out in the Pacific. It's never going to be important. Only, as you know, for later to be the central part of the world with World War II. So both of these gentlemen had a good forward-thinking perspective on what could and probably would take place in the future. And so that was the premise for the establishment of the magazine, to talk about justification and the creation of Israel and what the Palestinians had to endure in that. And so now we find ourselves embroiled with things. And it's needless to say, but important to say, that the magazine can't keep up with current events. There's so many things going on in the region and in the greater region, and the spillover from the war in Iran now, that they're hard pressed to come up with contemporaneous things as they happen. So it's a record of what's going on and a different narrative, as you said.
Mm-hmm. And you know something, on that note of what's happening right now in that tortured part of the world that is ironically referred to at times as the land of the prophets. I got a message here from a brother, a good brother of mine, a brother I'm very close to. He's Palestinian. He's a Palestinian American. He's an American citizen. He has extensive family ties still in Palestine, and he happens to be there right now, visiting family, and during a very tumultuous period. I mean, there's some stuff going on the West Bank that is heartbreaking. He sent this message to me a few days ago. Today, the Masjid Al-Aqsa was closed for Muslims because 5,000 settlers were expected to invade Al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa compound, to commemorate the destruction of the temple. And then he said the worshipers were not allowed, Muslim worshipers were not allowed into the compound for noon prayers. They were sent back. And it's really heartbreaking. And there's a piece of video I want us to see, but before we see this video, there is a quote that I want to share from, I believe this is one of the numerically minority, they are minority, unfortunately, right-minded, justice kind of oriented Israeli by the name of Ron Barkai, from Israel. There's a post that came to my attention from him. It reads, quote, "My heart goes out to you, my Palestinian brothers and sisters, for what awaits you tomorrow morning, Saturday, July 25th, 2026. A heinous plot was devised against you by IDF. The settlers and even the Democrats took part in it, took part in its plan." And then there is another message out of Occupy Palestine. "I'm sounding a 5-alarm emergency, 9/11 code red alert. Everything we are seeing points to an unprecedented wave of violence against the Palestinians in the West Bank, occupied territories. Starting within hours, local time in Israel, following the incident near Nablus yesterday, where a Jewish religious settler was killed after striking a Palestinian in his own village. And then our Palestinians were needlessly killed by IDF in their own village. This wave of massacres will spread like wildfire. And then IDF troops are being deployed to the region in mass numbers. Settler attacks have already begun. Senior Israeli officials are calling for vengeance. International human rights organizations are warning of the risk of mass atrocities. May God have mercy on all of our souls. And this is how this communication ends. Before I get your response to this, your thoughts on what has been taking place just recently, this settler instigated horrific flare-up on the West Bank. There's a piece of video that I'd like for us to see with this demonic leader engaging in arrogant discourse. Let's see that video, Brother Saalakhan.
We will not only bring down barriers between Israel and our neighbors, we'll build a new corridor of peace and prosperity that connects Asia through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, to Europe.
This dream of a new Middle East explains everything that's happening right now. This speech was given just a few weeks before October 7th, an attack that Israel knew about and allowed to happen because it gave them an excuse to commit genocide and flatten Gaza. They also knew that starting a war with Iran would cause the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which would shock the entire world economy. So it's no surprise that now Netanyahu is calling for the construction of oil pipelines that would bypass the Strait of Hormuz entirely. And Gulf countries are actually considering this. And this fits perfectly into Israel's plan, because that would mean that all oil that was once going through the strait is now going to be routed through Israel, making Israel a world superpower because it gives them control of the flow of about 40% of the world's oil. And then from there, the only competition remaining in that region is the Suez Canal, which is controlled by Egypt. But they have a plan for that too, which is the Ben Gurion Canal, which would bypass the need for the Suez Canal entirely and make Israel the hub in West Asia that connects Europe to the rest of the East. And that would basically solidify Israeli and Western control over the entirety of the West Asian region. And right now, the plan for the canal avoids Gaza, but they could save a ton of time and money if they could just build straight through Gaza, which is exactly what the Gaza Board of Peace promises with their new development plans. A board that Netanyahu himself sits on, because their plans for Gaza calls for it to be redeveloped into a special economic zone for big tech and billionaires, where they still control everything that goes in and out, and with the Palestinians being kept in tiny concentration camps. Ultimately, this is their plan to create a new Middle East, one that's completely subservient to the West and Israeli interests, and would make Israel into a global superpower. And this is why pro-Palestine activists have been screaming that the genocide in Gaza does not stop there, because it's working into a much larger plan to cement Israeli and Western control over the entire world. It was never going to stop in Gaza and is always going to come home and affect all of us eventually, and probably a lot sooner than any of us think. So really the only way for regular people like you and me to start resisting this is by using our dollars and using our voices. So that means boycotting, organizing for divestment, and educating our friends and neighbors. If you want more concrete ways to resist, you can check out our Palestine resource list, but whatever it is, do at least one thing today in support of a free Palestine.
Oh my goodness. These young folk like this young man here, they give me a lot of room for optimism in very dark times. Now, while that video was made by this young man, this video analysis was made by this young man just a few days ago, it's predicated on a speech that Netanyahu gave in October. Well, actually, before the October 7th tragedy, that many of the experts have opined with documented support, Israel allowed to happen. Hours-long decision not to respond to what they knew was taking place on from the other side. Or I should say what they knew was taking place in that area of occupied Palestine. And this piece of video of Netanyahu from almost 3 years ago, coupled with a number of other statements that have been made by him, declarations that he has made through in front of a number of audiences, both in Israel and abroad. It underscores the fact that they are using this. They have been using this, and they will continue to use this as much as they possibly can to expand or to deepen this dream of theirs for the expansion of a quote unquote greater Israel. What are your thoughts on that piece of video and what that video represents?
Well, this is, if you stand back and look at the global issue of expansionism, we see that in Ukraine.
Yes.
In this country, we want to take over Iceland or Greenland. Anything will do, everything will do. We want to take over Canada. Israel wants a greater Israel. They don't really want Palestinians there at all. They want the land for development. They want to build a pipeline. Pipelines are as vulnerable, if not more so, than the Straits of Hormuz. If you're going to build, if you look at the geography of the area and you're going to build a pipeline from Saudi Arabia, you have to go through Syria or Jordan to get to Israel. So how are you going to negotiate that? This whole expansionist ideology goes back to the 19th century when it was in our inalienable right to take over the North American continent and dictate terms to everybody else. So that seems to be human in nature. If you reflect on the news recently where Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was guaranteed by Trump more or less that they could have nuclear power and they would help them enrich it if they would recognize the Abraham Accords and accept Israel as a legitimate partner and state. This is all part of the ploy to move a pipeline through the area, I'm sure. I don't know how you get the pipeline underneath the Red Sea successfully where it's not vulnerable. So, you know, this whole regional ideology that somehow the US, the West, and Israel should control everything isn't any different in my mind than Russia assuming that it should control and dominate Europe for whatever purposes it wishes. What's going on in the West Bank that you were talking about is not reported here. It's if you watch something like British BBC or France 24, you'll see reports all the time of what's happening there. We can tend to focus on Gaza, but that's not a subject that's up for grabs on most media. I don't know of any media offhand, at least major media on television, that has talked about it continuously. There's periodically there's things. So I would agree with the gentleman in the video that there's a greater plan at foot. I don't know, you know, exactly. I don't think anybody does how this will manifest itself, but certainly Netanyahu is working a devious plan to try to take over, to not only dominate, but also to protect himself from a number of issues that he has floating around that haven't been addressed yet because of it. So it seems legitimate, at least on the surface to me, that there's a greater need, as you will say. You know, don't reflect too on the fact that gas and oil that's being pumped off the coast of Gaza is actually Palestinian resources that are being used by Israel, being pumped back to the mainland with the help of Chevron and some other companies. So we see this resource grab everywhere. Israel, as you know, is trying to grab resources and has around Cyprus, and Turkey's up in arms over that. There's been a lot of disagreement. Then there's the issue of Lebanon having access as well. It's doesn't portend well for the future in my mind, at any rate. The dynamics of it And with the U.S. interest being mostly about real estate development and more money, we're not in a very good position at this point.
Mhm. Tell me this: if I remember correctly from the conversation that we had a few days ago uh, over lunch, uh, you and Elaine recently visited Europe,
We did.
and I'm curious, and I'm sure that the viewing and listening audience would be curious to know. What are you seeing and hearing uh, in the places that you're visiting over there across the Atlantic?
Well, unlike here, I mean, there's a great movement here with respect to the genocide in Gaza and people being fed up with this useless war.
Mm-hmm.
And now with the war in Iran, which happened after we got back. But everywhere we've traveled in Europe, at least in Italy and France, um, people are up in arms over Gaza. I mean, you see, graffiti on walls and protests and people mad about, and these are young people. I've covered activist protests and demonstrations for 30 plus years. And, initially 30 years ago, there were a lot of young people involved, and it mostly ended up with people our age who are middle-aged and older. Um, Now I see we both saw a lot of younger people engaged in these issues. You can tell that from seeing the video on the flotillas and demonstrations and protests. Europe is unhappy with two things. A, the expansionist attitude and ideology of Russia, which is right at their front door, distant for us, so it doesn't seem nearly as important. And they're not happy about what's going on in the Middle East. The U.S. involvement, Israel's position in what's going on, this war now in Iran. So there's a great deal of resistance to this stuff. And I think that's only growing. And I would hope that it would get to the point where we would see, more reaction, not only on the street, but the European Parliament is not happy with what's happening. Several countries have disengaged themselves. I covered a protest in France where a new law was being considered by the French legislature to outlaw any discussion about Israel and Palestine at all. It would be considered anti-Semitic, and therefore you could be jailed if you engaged in anything, protest, writing, whatever.
Isn't that
People were very
Go ahead.
People were very upset because it's the third, republic, and part of their constitution is a guarantee of free speech, and this is an affront. It's going to be voted on. I believe it was in July or August of this year. It had been shot down very quickly, but there were a number of people in the street who were very upset by this, and rightfully so, being dictated to by another country what they can or can't say in their own country. And so, this is a universal issue, and we face that here with what we see going on here. Now with Trump's warning signs that are going to go up outside of the Museum of American History and the Smithsonian museums, warning people before they go in that the narratives being presented are not historically accurate and don't fit into this new narrative that we now have where, things like slavery were really misunderstood. It wasn't as bad as you think it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is contrary to fact, and academic perusal of these issues. So yes, Europe's upset. Europe's upset. The world is upset.
Mm-hmm. Have you been to the UK recently?
A year ago, we were in the UK. Yeah.
And what was the temperature like there then? And I'm quite certain that you being the journalist that you are, you follow what's happening in different parts of the world, including the UK. Right. What's your read on things now?
Well, respective to this issue, people, as you know, they've suffered even more. If you have any mention, I can't remember the name of the group now. Elaine might remember, but if you wear a T-shirt or you have Palestine Action on it, you can be jailed for up to 10 years. And so thousands of people have come out with that written on their shirts saying, go ahead and arrest me. What are you going to do with 10,000 people if you arrest them? How are you going to prosecute them? Where are you going to place them? And how fair is that? This is analogous to Trump's which I covered recently, the arraignment for this gentleman who touched the water and picked up a piece of the pond that was peeling off at the Lincoln Memorial, and the prosecutors asking for 10 years in prison for this egregious, what they termed as vandalism, which he said all he did was pick this piece up and look at it and let go of it. So we see this overreaction for things, of courts and legal proceedings being brought against people for their expressing themselves. You don't have to agree with them. I don't agree with a lot of things that I see, but I don't think people should be, jailed and chastised. And that's happening in Britain. When we were there, the cause célèbre the day that I was there that I covered was the right for people who are seriously ill at the end of their lives to be able to terminate their lives, to be able to say, I want assisted suicide. I don't want to be in pain any longer. I want to die. This was there were two camps. There were pro and anti outside of Parliament. And I think the British government finally did vote, if I'm correct, in the affirmative, that people could choose to terminate their lives. And this is not unlike abortion, where you have a person who owns their own body being told by the state what they can and can't do for religious or moral reasons. There are all kinds of laws. Everybody breaks laws every day. Some you just don't understand. They're beyond comprehension, the craziness of them.
The way that laws are being used as weapons of war, it reminds me of the advice that Niccolo Machiavelli, gave to the monarchs of his age, chronicled in his book, The Prince, right?
Yeah.
Wherein he said there are two ways of fighting: one with arms, and the other with law.
Right.
And what we have been seeing, and this is nothing new, we're just seeing more of it.
Right.
Is this this tendency of oppressive forces, both here and abroad, to use lawfare, as weapons of war.
Right.
Well,
we're seeing a Justice Department being politicized.
Yes.
For specific reasons. There's this micro focus on lawbreakers, but yet the biggest lawbreakers walk away. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
It says at the Supreme Court, above the front door, equal justice under the law. That's another great American fantasy, like you were talking about earlier. There's these narratives and these ideological positions, but when it comes to application, it becomes another thing. There's also a famous quote of two kinds of lawyers: ones that know the law and ones that know the judge. Very true. It's the same sort of a thing that we're talking about. In this prosecution of Davy Herney, I believe is his name, that touched the pond and is looking at 10 years. I'm sure that's not going to go anywhere. I would bet it gets thrown out of court. But in the meantime, he has to defend himself. He has to get an attorney. He has to go to court hearings. It's going to destroy his life for what?
Yes. His life is disrupted.
We talked about in our conversation the other day a number of people who have been prosecuted on very little evidence or no evidence at all, but had their lives disrupted. And in one case we talked about for 20 years.
Yeah.
Being embroiled in a system only to have it all dismissed and go away. This happened with renditions also, where people were snagged off the street for dubious reasons, trumped up charges, flown around, and then released without even an apology, And they did nothing, were never prosecuted, were never indicted, were never brought to court, because there was nothing there. But it was, and you're familiar with more than one case, I know, of exactly the same thing. So it's Machiavellian, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, my human rights work goes all the way back to the as it pertains to prisoners, specifically to political prisoners. It goes all the way back to the early 90s, with a case out of the Washington area that revolved around when it erupted, a 15-year-old African-American male by the name of Terrence Johnson. This is how it began, and it was a heartbreaking case that from start to finish, it was a heartbreaking case. But that is how my work around prisoner issues began, with that case, and then there have been so many other cases to come behind that. The case of Mumia Abu-Jamal, still imprisoned after all of these years, an award-winning journalist like yourself, still imprisoned after all of these years from a manufactured case out of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, and to the many other cases, the Johnny Gamage case in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Abner Louima case in New York City. There have been just so many cases that have been heartbreaking that we've been involved in, and it's just a little microcosm of this macrocosm of state-sponsored injustice that doesn't reflect well on the better of the two Americas.
Not at all. And now we see that turned against itself within the system.
That's
the
right.
system's attacking itself.
That's right, brother.
To try to place one position or one ideology over another. This is not what this country is about. And you and I know that. I can remember getting involved in civil rights in high school, and I was chastised for trying to get people to understand that we are all created equal according to our founding documents. But the application beyond that, it ended at the period at the end of the sentence,
Mm-hmm.
And you see that now with these prosecutions of people who have prosecuted Trump, and back and forth, and the legal system being used for its vindictiveness, and justice has been thrown aside and well practiced because of what you're talking about for many 200 years of miscarriages in any number of instances. And somebody once said everybody in jail is not guilty, but the reality is many people are not guilty, and they end up there because of circumstances and what have you. And I can't tell you how many things we've covered where people have been arrested or detained for being quote unquote terrorists, which they had nothing to do with, but it was a means of detaining or creating an example for others not to follow in even near footprints. And that seems to be part of life. And your theme today reminds me of one thing, and that's the freedom of movement, which we take for granted. And I think overall, this is what we should be experiencing right now. And that is how Americans had taken for granted their own freedoms and what we called democracy for so long without understanding what the real costs are when that doesn't exist any longer, or how that can be circumvented or taken away so easily from us that we begin to see other things, other perspectives. And many people in the world don't have that freedom of movement, either because of economics, because of tyrannical governments, which are manipulating their lives in many ways, because of social reasons or whatever. And so really, it's a privilege to be able to travel and to be able to do so in depth and to experience these things firsthand so that you have a better understanding of not only what's going on, but especially from a journalistic perspective, of being able to relate that to other people, some of whom listen, some don't, but at least our magazine and other magazines and people involved in independent media are really important assets and aspects of that whole notion of freedom of the press. If it hadn't been for the pamphleteers during a revolution, there probably wouldn't have been a revolution. They couldn't rely on a local newspaper that was going to publish anything that was contrary. It would be smashed and squashed in the process.
So yeah, we have much that we should still be grateful for, and we have much to protect.
Absolutely.
I often, from time to time, I reference J. William Fulbright's book, The Arrogance of Power, and from which he made that very on point observation from the perch that he had within the U.S. Senate, that there are two Americas, and there have always been two Americas, and and with that understanding comes a responsibility on our part to do as much as we can to advance and defend the better of the two.
Right.
And it's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy.
Well, it's a struggle. You get the democracy that you're willing to fight for.
That's right.
And if you become complacent and sit back and let it roll the way it wants to, then it's going to be up and down the entire time. It's going to change, and maybe not for the better. And we're seeing that now. This direction we're going in is not what America's about. It's about what a specific agenda being set by people who are in position. You were talking about billionaires earlier. And we have this problem now of billionaires who feel endowed to formulate and reform society into their vision of what we should all live under. That is not what we're about. It's supposed to be a government by and for people, and not everybody being a billionaire means that there are more voices than are being heard. But money talks, and we know what the power of that's all about. And so we're losing the grip that we had on the ability to be able to form change. And if we don't react to that strongly and peacefully, then we will lose what power we have, and we'll end up being dictated to, rather than being able to make choices. I walk by in Washington, D.C., around the city, there are ballot boxes, which are placed on the sidewalks, making it convenient for people who vote at home. If they don't want to mail their ballot in, they can drop it in a ballot box. And I walked by one yesterday, and it has a padlock on it, of course, because there isn't an election. But I hope that's not a portender of what's going to happen at midterms, where we see all this interference in people's voting rights, of having to prove who you are and go jump through 18 hoops. It reminds me of the Jim Crow era. How many beans are there in the jar? And if you don't guess the right number, you can't vote. The history of my family as indentured servants in Hawaii was they had to pay $1 for a poll tax every month when they got their money, which was a significant sum for them, and they were not allowed to vote. So they had to pay for voting but couldn't vote. And I see that trend coming back around, where you're not who you are, you're disenfranchised for whatever reason. And so, manipulating this, we've gone around the world forcing people and trying to enforce in governments the right of vote, the plebiscite, and yet we can't establish it on our own without rules and regulations and, this microscopic view. Now I read California rejected 445,000 ballots, I think, because they couldn't count them after they were postmarked a day late, because the post office was too slow in canceling them. And, we need a better system, obviously, and we need reform, but it needs to be reasonable and inclusive, not, elitist and non-inclusive.
That's right. And protected from the manipulators who would exploit it for their own personal gain.
Absolutely.
Okay, my brother, listen, I want us to go to, we just have a few minutes left in this broadcast. What I'd like for us to do, Brother Sadiq, is go to a commercial break. And then on the other side of this commercial, we will have a final thought from today's guests. So let's go to the commercial.
Are you banking with convenience, transparency, and flexibility? With Al Barakah Bank's transactional banking account, you can enjoy convenient everyday banking designed around your needs. Benefit from zero fees on point-of-sale transactions and manage your banking easily through Al Barakah's secure mobile banking app and internet banking platform. From everyday payments to managing your personal or business banking, Al Barakah makes banking simple, transparent, and convenient. Visit albarakah.co.za to learn more. Al Barakah, your partner bank. Al Barakah Bank Limited is an authorized financial services and credit provider.
Hey, Gulam.
Yeah?
Did I return your lawnmower last month?
No, bye, you didn't.
Oh, no. Now what'll I do? I wanted to borrow it again, man.
With Randry Jewelers, you won't have to borrow or lend because the prices are so well trimmed on all gold and diamond jewelry. Alternatively, we could remake your old jewelry into a brilliant new design. Visit Randry Jewelers at 151 Stevens Lamini Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randry Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
Somewhere in Africa, women wake before dawn, not to pray but to walk. Hours across dry land just to bring water home every single day. This August, Africa Muslims Agency invites families to The Source, a charity market where every purchase helps bring clean water to Africa. Join us at The Source on the 1st of August, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., 31 West Street, Houghton. Shop, gather, give.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning or for that late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, Now We Cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Welcome back. If you missed today's program, we are in our final 3 minutes. You can catch it through the link and catch it in its entirety. We've had the pleasure of a dear friend, Phil Pasquini, dialoguing with me on some of the burning issues of the day. And what I'd like to do at this point, Phil, is just invite you to share any final thought you have with the viewing and listening audience, anything that you consider to be of relevance to this topic for today. And then also I'd like for you to share how folk can get in contact with you who may wish to do so.
Well, I think it's important that people take the responsibility, if you're living in a democracy, to be involved, to be engaged. And without doing that, you have no one to blame but yourself for what comes down. People say protests and demonstrations don't do any good. Superficially, they don't, but it's the collectiveness of them that causes things to happen. I saw that happen with civil rights to a great extent. Obviously, it's changed a bit. And the same with the war in Vietnam. When people were resistant to that initially, they were called communists and all kinds of things. But because of that persistence and consistency, it did turn things around. So I think engagement is very important. No matter how much or how little you can be involved, being involved is being able to help determine the future direction of things that you may disagree with or want to see changed. I think that's absolutely the most important thing you can do.
And how can people reach you?
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I can be reached. You can reach me through my website. It's just my name, philpasquini.com. There's a link there for email, and I can be reached through that for anyone that may have questions or comments. That's the easiest way. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you today.
It was
always good
brother.
conversing with you.
So I want to thank you for joining us today, and
my pleasure.
Give my salams to Elaine, and
Michelle.
You have a blessed day, my friend. And
you too.
On that note, we're going to close out as we normally do in these challenging times with a verse from the Quran, Surah Al-Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wal Asr. Innal insana lafi kusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati. Wa tawassaw bil haqq. Wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss. except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.